And I know you each have your own story. I have to offer mine. It's part of the exchange. A recent story for me is I was trying to recover a recipe that I learned in Guatemala about using these green corn tortillas to do this recipe. And I knew we weren't going to get the green corn tortillas in the grocery store. So I had noticed that there was this little tienda north of the city in Asheville, in Weaverville. I drove up in there and I walked in, and with my best Spanish, I asked him, you got some green corn tortillas? He says, no, we don't. But I'll make you some if you can wait a little bit. So while I'm standing there, making time with Eduardo, he's got his tortilla press out, and he's got the green corn mash, and he's making green corn tortillas right there, hand flopped over into a pile that he's going to put in saran wrap and send me off with. 20 cents a tortilla, right there made on the spot. So while he's doing it, we're talking, and I said, so how long have you been here? 2 years, came up straight from Cuernavaca. And my family's here, and we're supporting them with this new tienda. Thanks for coming by and supporting a local business. What do you do for fun? Oh, I hang out with my friends down at the parking lot. He tells me about it. It's basically a bunch of guys from Mexico and Colombia, and they get together on Friday nights. And he says, you should come with me sometime. I'll come pick you up. And it felt like an invitation into his community. So I had to say, yes, Eduardo, come by. I'll be here 2 Fridays. So he comes by in his lowrider pickup truck, and I climb in with him, and he's playing his music from his home community. And we drive down to this parking lot that I didn't even know existed in front of an abandoned grocery store, and I come to hang out with his buddies. And it's about 40, 50 guys, and they're there just to drink beer, talk about girls and their work. And they listen to the music while they're doing their music. And I was the only Anglo there, and I asked him, just introduce me as Tom. He doesn't know anything about my background. He doesn't even ask me. I'm just a guy hanging out with him in the parking lot. But after a while, some of them look me up on the web, and a few Fridays later, one of them comes up to me and says, are you the same Tom Brackett who's a priest in the Episcopal Church? Yeah, well, why didn't you tell us, Padre? So from that moment on, I'm Padre, and I talk to them about drinking and girls and their work, and I start asking them this crazy request, quite privately, one-on-one. Hey, what's the music you listen to when you feel close to God? Or what's the music you listen to when you want to feel close to God? Oh, and they start telling me about it. Oh, I don't know anything about it. So I say, why don't you bring me a sample of it? So they start showing up, and very kind of surreptitiously, they hand me CDs that they've created, mixed tracks of the music they listen to when they want to feel close to God. Between us, right, Padre? Sure. So I stick it in my pocket, and typically I'll listen to 1 or 2 of them on the way home. And it was very touching. I felt so honored that they would choose to share this music with me. And after a while, I kind of get to know the power dynamics. And there's this one tough guy, Angel, right? Tough guy, bodybuilder. I find out he's the foreman down at the plant that most of them work at. And he doesn't speak English like the rest of them do. He's still trying to stay close to his culture, but he's trying to stay tough. Machismo, right? Angel. But Angel, too, finally breaks down, and he hands me a brown paper bag wrapped CD in a new jewel case. And I open it up, and I realize that he has handwritten his own playlist of the songs that he's included, which range from countertenor singing a very classical version of Ave Maria, all the way to Mexican street rap in the Catholic tradition, or Catholic music in the Mexican street rap tradition. I couldn't tell which was which, but he's got 6 songs that he writes at the bottom, makes me feel close to Dios, to God. And he hands it to me, and as he does, very quietly, he says, it's really between us, right? I listened to it all the way home, twice, and I cry my heart out to think that this tough guy gives me this music. So we hang out. Every time I'm in Fridays I'm in Asheville, I go down to the parking lot, and I hang out with the guys. And people come and go, but now it's 50, 60 of them. Now it's beginning of winter, and we're hanging out there in the dark, and some of them run their engines, so they turn their headlights on, and some of them have backed in, some of them have turned in, but we're there, and we have a rhythm, and we're hanging out. And one Friday night, Angel comes to me and he says, I got to talk to you. Can we meet at the Denny's on Thursday? I have the afternoon free, 2 o'clock. So I show up at the Denny's right around the corner, and I look around, there's no Angel. And I have to lean, and I notice that around the corner in the back, there's Angel sitting there quietly looking down at the table, got a cup of coffee. He buys me one, and he says, when we start talking, he says, you're the first priest that has made room for me. And I said, made room for you? He said, yeah, my Mexican priest won't let me come and receive communion. I said, Angel, you're faithful, you're Catholic, you tell everybody you're Catholic. He said, I know. But he knows that I have a boyfriend. I said, yeah, well, so fine. He said, well, we've been friends since childhood. I've already gotten what he's trying to tell me, but he doesn't dare say it yet. And we've been friends for life. We want to spend our lives together. And, and I realize he's circling around me to see if it's okay. I said, so you have a partner, right? He said, yeah, but these guys don't know. It's between us, right? You can't tell anybody, right? And he's really nervous, and I realize he's profusely perspiring in front of me. And I said, so I'm going to read this passage to you. And I pull out the Kindle, and I dig it up, and I read to him the story of Jesus' baptism, where he hears the clouds open, a voice comes down, pigeon comes out, and says, this is my beloved, the one in whom I'm well pleased. Hear what he's got to say. And I said, if Jesus were here now, Jesus were here now, he would say to you, you, Angel, you're my beloved. And he starts to cry. And he says, how do you know that's true? And he says, that's what God calls all of us, every one of us without respect. And he takes it in, he's mute, he won't say anything else. He hugs me, we go. A week later, I get a call from his mama, only in Spanish, saying that her son was hit by a drunk driver one night in Columbia, South Carolina, while he was crossing the street. He had just parked his truck walking across the street to a restaurant to meet a friend. Drunk driver hits him, he's instantly gone. And she says, he called you his padre, you have to do his service. Find us a church. I said, I don't have a church. She says, well, find us a church. So I go to the Catholic churches, and I ask the guys the next Friday, any of you have a Catholic church you go to? No, we don't go to church. I go to the Episcopal churches. They don't know what to do. The bishop's not clear yet about how do you offer communion to a bunch of guys who are not even received in their own church? Catholics, would this offend their sensibilities and their Catholic tradition? We're not sure. So I go back to the guys the next Friday and I say, hey guys, our bishop's not sure about what to do with us here. What do you think we should do? And they said, you got to go meet with his mom. She'll tell you what to do. So I go down and I meet with them in the trailer park down there in Hendersonville, and Angel's partner is sitting across the table. I meet him for the first time. He doesn't tell me who he really is, but I'm meeting with the family, and I realize they're all together, and we're designing a service, and they say, well, where do we have this service? And by then it just dawns on me. The only way to honor what God had been doing in our midst was to meet in the same parking lot. And the liturgy that needed to come from that parking lot, and our time meeting together. And the lighting for our service had to come from their headlights. And it dawned on me in the same instant that the music for the ritual had to be the music that we'd been gathering over the year and a half. And that I had it in my pocket. I had brought all 11 of the CDs together. And so I handed it all off to them. And I said, Mom, Madre, what's the part of the service, the Memorial of the Dead, that speaks to your heart, that calls to you from your Catholic tradition? And she pulls it out. She pulls out her well-worn prayer book and her beads, and she helps us lay it out. And a couple of the guys had come with me, and we laid out a street ritual that they used in Mexico in their street communities. And we combined it with the Book of Common Prayer, and we printed it on bulletins in English and in Spanish, and we came together on a Friday night in the same parking lot. And they had drawn a chalk circle that they pulled all their cars up to, so that the center of the circle was led into by an open space with a table in the middle, and it was lit by their headlights. And before I even got there, they had already queued up and synced music on all the stereos around there. So we had music lined up with a little bit of variance here and there, but it all really wrapped around the space that they had created in ritual and in faith as a way of honoring this man whom they all knew was gay, whom they loved dearly, the angel in their midst. So we did the service, and it was powerful. and the father and the mother and the brothers and the sisters and the partner all pulled in with a picnic table in the back of his pickup truck. And they had his urn of ashes and green corn tortillas and grape juice for the communion service. And we shared communion together, passing from each to the other. This is the green corn tortilla that Jesus shares with us, the bread of reconciliation. This is the grape juice that we offer each other in remembrance, in the memory of Jesus who came among us. We passed out, we went down the street with a police escort that we had to wrestle out of the police department. We get to the end of Patton Avenue where they were used to squealing their tires in a U-turn before they took off racing each other down the full 4-mile length. But this time with police in the beginning and police at the end, we have almost 200 cars in procession because the word had spread. And we get halfway down Patton Avenue, and the father, who already knew the ritual better than I did, invites me to stand right behind the cab, and he takes the lid off the ashes, and we hold them up in the wind, and his ashes are spread out in this ritual of spreading the ashes. And we all go to the far end, turn around, come back into the circle, and we end there by sharing a meal with each other and telling stories about Angel's life. And I thought, whoa, that's the best. It doesn't get any better than that. And I've been living in the glow of that until a few weeks ago. Now some months have passed, and I'm in the middle of a video conference for the Episcopal Church Center from my dining room. I work from my home. And there's a knock on the door, and I open it up with my headset on now outside of the camera view, and it's a police officer. And I'm thinking, oh, God, what did my daughter do now? She's 17. I'm thinking they caught up with us. They figured out where she lives. And he says, no, it's not business. I just want to talk to you. I said, well, can you give me 5 minutes? Come on in. He sits down. We're there, sitting at the dining room table. He hears the conversation as I'm wrapping it up. And then finally I close the lid on, take the headset off. And he says, I can tell I came to the right house. You're a priest, right? Yeah. He said, you did that ritual down there in the parking lot a year and a half ago, right? Yeah. Well, my partner and I were in one of the lead cars that night. And my partner says to me, as we do the U-turn and we're coming around and the ashes are flying out behind us, he says, when I go, I want this service. You got to know we wrestled with the police department to get an escort. They hated the idea. They couldn't stand that they were going to be part of a street ritual like that. And I told him that I was going to be here in your neighborhood, and we've been talking about it. He said, so I told him I would look you up and see if it was okay to put your name on our police record so that if something happens to us, they can come to you and ask you to do the same service for us. Can I give you my partner's name? And I realized that the gift that Angel offered was to remind me that the original yes was not to grow the Episcopal Church or to create a thriving and vital parish somewhere. But it was to make known to people of the street God's fierce love for them. To speak in street language about what it means to be beloved. And to make it safe for people to come when they were most afraid and say, would you help us create ritual where, with as few words as possible, we can convince the skeptics among us? And have a sense that that's why you're here, too. You have your own version of that, yes. But I offer you this story as a way of saying it doesn't take a lot of community organizing, although you'll hear the principles of community organizing embodied in the story as I've shared it. They have their own version of the same story. It doesn't take you knowing Spanish to engage a Spanish-speaking community. It doesn't take you being an amazing liturgist that can convince your bishop that even people who are not baptized should receive communion. It doesn't take any of that. It just takes saying, as you said so well, Ryan, it takes saying yes again and again and again and being willing to be surprised where that yes will take you. It takes a fierceness to preserve that yes. No excuses, no fear. It takes a fierceness to say no so that I can keep saying yes. It feels like there's more of the story, but it feels like a good place to pause for right now and ask, how do you hear your yeses coming up in that story? That's a good way to turn this back to you and ask, how do your yeses show up in this story?